The dangers of lowering cholesterol, being hyper aggressive with cholesterol lowering. We all know that over the last few decades, the medical establishment has become very aggressive with cholesterol management, wanting to get the bad cholesterol as low as possible. We are going to talk as three doctors openly and transparently about our concerns with this strategy. And for anybody who enjoys our discussions, please check out our separate, unique channel down below, Doctors of Ojai, where we post a lot of exclusive content related to your health and well-being. So let's dive right in then. The dangers of lowering cholesterol. Let's talk.
That's a great topic, Suneel. And really, across the board, we always talk about cholesterol as a villain. And I think that when is the last time you as a patient has gone to your doctor and they've talked about really the benefits of cholesterol? And cholesterol has really gone a bad rap, but we do know that cholesterol is really the building block of life, right? I mean, there are so many different parts of your body that need cholesterol. The whole concept of lower the better, which every cardiologist and most primary cares are drilled into thinking that the lower we can get your cholesterol, the better, is really out of context and is outdated, because we know that just treating one number across the board does not fit with everyone, and people need to be individualized. So this is a really great topic to talk about. I'm excited to talk about it. So
I agree. It's interesting. We act like cholesterol is this poison in the body that just appeared and we immediately have to get rid of it because it's causing so much damage. I mean, in my experience, God doesn't put things in the body by accident. And it has a number of very important jobs that we'll talk about. So to say that cholesterol immediately needs to be eliminated and you need to get it as low as physically possible, that's something we're going to talk about today. And I think you're going to see that may not always be the best thing to do.
Absolutely. And it's so important because we all know the main medications, which are seen as a miracle drug by huge segments of the medical establishment. We've talked about this before, statins, to lower cholesterol as much as possible. Now, nothing we're about to say is, of course, direct medical advice. Never change or stop any medication yourself. Always have a discussion, hopefully with your trusted doctor. What we want to bring awareness to is a topic which we believe doctors don't talk about enough. Now, let's think about this. Some basic facts. The brain is 60% fat. Cell membranes throughout the body contain cholesterol. They are made of cholesterol. So, gentlemen, what are your thoughts? How did we get to a position where cholesterol is seen as the enemy? As soon as you say the word cholesterol, people think of something bad when it's this vital part of the body. And the medical establishment now wants to be super aggressive with lowering this number.
that's a really good point. I believe that the reason that it's happened that way, it's a number that people feel like they could control. And it was sort of a tangible number that we could say, get your cholesterol down. So in people with coronary artery disease or plaque buildup in the arteries, is the lower the better. And that's always been the case. And really it's because of just some of the studies that have shown that getting cholesterol can reduce the risk of heart attacks and strokes. But in reality, does it do it for everyone? And I think that's a broader topic here, is all cholesterol bad? Do some people have better makeup of the cholesterol than others? So just the whole idea of just getting it down as low as possible across the board, as I said before, does not fit everyone. And I really think it's a tangible nature of cholesterol that we're attacking, but it's actually probably not the best thing to keep attacking, because as we'll get into, there are just so many benefits of cholesterol. Like you said, Ben, our body has cholesterol for a reason, and people process cholesterol differently. And there are dangers to having too low cholesterol.
There are, and I'm very concerned. I mean, I've seen the guidelines, and when we're talking about putting older people, especially, and I've seen doctors, this is getting worse, it seems, by the year, must have an LDL bad cholesterol under 80 or under 70 because they've had an event happen. I wonder how much has this been studied, and are people really thinking that, especially at the extremes of age, the dangers of lowering this vital substance in the body? Because unfortunately, as things stand, the medical establishment gets very excited about fixing numbers. And I've got a story to tell, more than one story to tell, which I can certainly do later. We'll dive into like individual bits of research raising concern about specific problems. But how do you feel, Ben, as our amazing primary care doctor who is obviously being told to manage cholesterol, get it low, but having some questions about the wisdom of this strategy?
With cholesterol, I think with almost everything else in medicine, it's very rare you can find a one size fits all. I mean, we do have guidelines that we try to adhere to and try to take into consideration. But when I see cholesterol, I take a look at the entire patient. To me, those are just numbers. I have to look at all the labs, all their numbers, what they're eating, what they're doing. And to me, this idea that, oh, cholesterol's high, immediately put them on a medication, don't question, their history and whether or not they have heart disease or stroke or anything like that. Just immediately put them on a cholesterol. I think there's a lot more to it. And I think once you treat the number, there can also be this very false sense of security that, oh, the patient's on a statin, so we don't have to talk about everything else, like minimizing sugar consumption and all the other things, exercising, strength, stress, all the other things that are important to a healthy lifestyle. I think that's a huge mistake that doctors make all the time.
So true. And just to break it down, so remember, LDL, lower the better, as we say, as people used to say, and that's what we're talking about now. So the LDL is a bad cholesterol, HDL is a good cholesterol. Then you have your total cholesterol and your triglycerides, which is sort of the fat makeup in your blood. And so, here's like the perfect scenario as a patient. You go see your primary care, you have high cholesterol, your primary care may manage or not, or they'll send you to a cardiologist. Mm-hmm. And what happens is we're calculating what your risk of having a stroke or heart attack over the next 10 years. And based on that number, regardless of your diet, we're actually just throwing you on a medication and we're trying to dive that cholesterol down. But honestly, when is the last time that your doctor has actually checked to make sure your cholesterol is not too low? It's rare that people ever have their cholesterol checked to make sure it's not too low. It's always checked to make sure it's not too high. We're not even ever talking really about the makeup of that bad cholesterol. So two people can have high bad cholesterols. One person has a heart attack, the other one doesn't. Now, there's obviously some genetic makeups and predispositions, but ultimately it can be what the patient's eating. So the insulin resistance, which we're all big in, especially you, Suneel, and just eating carbs and all the refined carbs oxidize or turn that bad cholesterol into more sticky cholesterol. So it really, we're never focused on the diet. We're just about getting the number, the lower the better. And actually the guidelines will even say in people who are high risk to get the LDL below 55. But we know that getting the LDL below 40 or the total cholesterol below 120 can put people at risk.
Yeah, really well said. And I believe, Dr. Peter, you said before that in one of our shows that it's like smoke from a fire, having cholesterol, which is high. Invariably nowadays, I mean, not always, nothing is absolute, but invariably nowadays, insulin resistance is the cause of high cholesterol, people consuming the wrong foods, not moving enough. And we could obviously talk for a long time about that. With lowering cholesterol specifically, now let's talk about some of the risks. Now, just imagine, just picture this for a moment. You have this substance which is vital for the body, okay? And you're super aggressive about lowering it. Sometimes I feel like saying to doctors, especially the physician leaders who run societies that make guidelines, I feel like saying, hello, doctor, is anybody at home? Have you actually thought this through? Why are you being so aggressive? And have you thought about what it's going to do if you lower the cholesterol to a ridiculous number, especially, and I feel terrible. I see people come into the hospital. I have for many years, thankfully now I work in some better places, but over the years, my goodness, I've seen some doctors come in and tell an 85 or 90-year-old, take this whopping dose of statin to lower your number. And they're not thinking. Now, one of the areas of research that I have seen, I've found very concerning, and it makes a lot of sense to me, is a link between really lowering cholesterol with statin medications and cognitive impairment. Again, we're not telling anybody out there to stop your medicine, but this is definitely a concern if cholesterol is being lowered, and it makes perfect sense because the brain is 60% fat.
You're absolutely right. That's a significant concern. Again, you have to weigh the situation and what's happening with the patient, what they need, and what's happening with you. You have to think about it, and you have to talk to doctor about it. But absolutely, you can't just lower a person's cholesterol, to an obscene point without thinking that it's going to cause some kind of damage. The brain uses fat and cholesterol. Its makeup is predominantly these things. The nerve sheaths have cholesterol in them. You can't just completely eliminate this from the body. We've also found, and there are some studies that show that very low cholesterol can be associated with hemorrhagic strokes. So if you lower it way too much, I mean, I'm talking quite low. If you lower it way too much, you can even have severe events. So, low cholesterol is also should be a significant concern if you're putting someone on a medication and you're not watching where it takes them.
That's true. And this isn't necessarily to be about anti-medicine, it's just about pro-context. So
Right.
it's really the context of the patient. And as a patient, have you been in the age of the population that was studied in medications I used to treat cholesterol often are used off-label in a sense on older people and getting the cholesterol down way too low. But it's really the whole idea of just one number fits all is really not a great way of doing preventative medicine. And I think that's something that really needs to be focused on because we have to get rid of that concept of just treating someone and being overly obsessed with the numbers, but not with what people are doing to achieve those numbers.
Absolutely. And another thing, I just want to bring this, another thing that has to do with kind of brain health and cognition and everything like that is mood and anxiety, depression. And we know that many important hormones and also, again, the nerve sheath use cholesterol for their production. So what is this doing to people's moods? Are they suffering from anxiety and depression from some of, having their cholesterol lowered too much? And you do wonder that.
I've
You
seen
have
that
to
research, yeah.
you have to ask those questions. I don't think 90% of people are asking those questions when they put someone on a statin. What's this going to do to their anxiety, their depression, their mood in general? So you have to ask those questions. And if you're lowering it well below a target, which a lot of people are doing, I think it's absolutely going to cause some kind of.
It is. And I've seen that research on mood, cognition. I mean, it's all linked together with the brain. It makes perfect logical sense to me that if you're hyper aggressive about this fixing the number, I don't understand for the life of me, and Dr. Peter, you can shed some light. I have my own issues with the entire specialty of cardiologists, not yours truly, but cardiology and the things that they are focused on as opposed to the main elephant in the room. Insulin resistance would be a classic example. Cardiologists everywhere obsessed with salt and saturated fat, when nowadays that's not even the main cause of high cholesterol and cardiac disease. But what do you think, Dr. Peter, about this philosophy among cardiologists of getting super happy with a low LDL number? Why are people as intelligent as cardiologists? And again, I'm not asking you to basically vilify your entire specialty, but I'm trying to understand why cardiologists are so obsessed with this number.
That's such a good point. It's really been drilled in through, you do a fellowship training to be a cardiologist. And throughout that training, it's always about drilling the numbers. And I do think people do feel a sense of achievement with it. And they maybe think it's a tangible marker that they can show the patient. But in reality, also, the government actually does audits on, how patients are measured, how they're treated. And based on that, really can rate how a doctor is. So what I'm talking about here is that there are certain medications that patients need to be on or should be on. Like if you have coronary artery disease, you have to really document in your chart why someone isn't on a statin medication.
Mm-hmm.
So there is an incredible pressure from people above to put people on medications because as a doctor, you can sort of be penalized. All right. That's called MACRA, MACRA. And so it's the way how in Medicare and government agencies evaluate doctors based on outpatient control of certain conditions. And one of them is cholesterol, being on a statin, being on aspirin. So that is definitely a big push. And there's an incredible pressure, I think, for cardiologists to keep lowering cholesterol. And really when you send a patient, or when not you guys, but when patients are sent to a cardiologist, there's an expectation that cardiologist is going to put you on a statin. And I've come across a lot where I've talked to primary care. I've talked to patients who they said their primary care wants them to see me so I could discuss statin therapy. So it's already preemptively telling me, or patients have expectations that their cure-all is a cholesterol medication. I know I'm talking around this topic here. There's no direct answer of why doctors get excited about low numbers. I think we're always been educated and trained to think that lower is better. And I think we don't really think outside in the bigger picture that every single cell membrane is made of cholesterol. So it'd be really naive to think that getting the number down really low wouldn't have some other secondary impact on the body, right?
Yeah.
It's just ubiquitous throughout the body. Every cell membrane you think about has cholesterol. We're trying to get it way down. And whether it's on medication or not, it's just the idea of not really ever taken into context of what the benefits of cholesterol are. When is the last time you've had that conversation with your doctor as the benefits of cholesterol? Cholesterol's been touted as this huge villain in the cardiology world, where maybe it's not.
Okay, everyone, I'm going to interrupt that awesome discussion for a moment to tell you about our expanding natural health and well-being store. We are very proud of our expanding store. We have natural immune inflammation support, bone support, memory support, heart support, sleep support, and our newly released premium organic lion's mane and organic chai mix. We've got some great reviews so far. Check in the links down below. ohighwellness.com if you're in the USA, North America, ohighwellness.co if you're in the UK, Europe. Also keep an eye out for our upcoming food and beverage products, including protein-thin snacks. All right, back to the discussion.
Yeah, no, I wholeheartedly agree with you. I think, to steal some lines from Dr. Suneel over here, but moderation, right? Everything is the balance. Everything's about being in the middle. And we do know there's a bell-shaped curve with cholesterol. If it's off the charts too high and you have multiple other problems, yeah, it's worth addressing. But if it's too low, that's a significant issue too. And no one talks about it. It is not an understood phenomenon. It's not something that's discussed in medicine at all. And you're right, in cardiology and medicine, that's what's pushed. Check for high cholesterol and immediately start treating it. All the guidelines say that you're held to those standards, you're held to those metrics from all the societies and the payers and everybody. So it's a major issue.
I think that you two have explained it really well. I thought your explanation was fantastic there about, firstly, the pressure from above, the fact that cardiologists are human and they have learned something throughout residency and fellowship. And most of them will be very excited about fixing this number. And of course, it's always a balance. And again, if somebody's cholesterol is through the roof, LDL approaching 200, a discussion can happen with the doctor about the statins. And we've made podcast shows before about the number needed to treat and whether it really is a miracle drug or whether it's a Band-Aid. You can certainly go, and I'll include a link down below to those prior episodes for specific numbers. And we know that this is a common scenario in medicine, sadly. Going all in, being aggressive. We saw this during the pandemic, and it's very sad. And what we think of as very low cholesterol, when we're getting down, I would say either towards 100, double digits. In some people, I have big concerns that is too low for them, and it's causing adverse events. And we mentioned the risk of cognitive decline. People can get mood disturbances, hormones. I have seen some evidence that there's a link with testosterone issues in men if you are hyperaggressive with lowering this key component of hormones. And again, it makes perfect sense. What we're really arguing for here is more debate and discussion instead of the vast majority of doctors jumping all over this. And where do the public get their cues from? It is from doctors. People forget this often, that when doctors do something in the health field, it will quickly filter through. And the public didn't get this impression that cholesterol is bad from nowhere, just like no policy you saw during the pandemic came out of thin air. Every single country in the world was taking directives from doctors. So this is the truth. That how can we encourage more debate about this within medicine? How do we get doctors to think more and ask questions like, is lowering the cholesterol aggressively a bad thing?
it's really a conversation to have with their doctor about what can I do to make my cholesterol better? And really, we know that healthy cholesterol follows healthy metabolism. And if you can really increase in your lifestyle changes and really make that cholesterol better, is that a better conversation to have with a patient? Is it worth a visit to talk the whole talk about what dose of statin, or should you really be talking about what can I do and change in my diet that would make my cholesterol healthier as opposed to lower?
One thing we
Right.
need to see too is one thing I've seen, and you guys have brought this up. A patient will go to one of you guys will go to your doctor, and you'll have to fight with them. So you'll say, "I just have a question." The doctor will get upset, or they'll get irritated, or they'll say, "Well, fine, then you just go have a stroke or heart." I've seen that kind of behavior before. So patients, I think, are beginning to ask questions, but doctors still aren't asking. So that, I think, is the second part of the equation that has to change. We've been taught some very incredible things, but we've also been taught some not so good things, and we've been brainwashed on a few things. So we need to really step outside and rethink a lot of this and explore other possibilities. Doctors do not know everything. It's time to open up our minds again and start revisiting some of these things that we've started to take for granted. Because there are things out there that we've done for a long time that may or may not be the right thing to be doing.
Very true. And anyone watching, please feel free as well to comment down below if anything like that has happened to you before, or you've been the subject of a discussion on aggressively lowering cholesterol. You've had doubts. We enjoy hearing your stories. I'm sure everyone else will enjoy your stories and perspective down below as well. It's important that we keep on discussing this because we will reach a critical mass eventually if more people ask questions. This happened during the pandemic. Eventually, doctors who sadly are behind will catch on to what you all are thinking, because this is all about you. Healthcare and medicine ultimately is about you wanting the best for you. This is why we're bringing these questions up. And there's always a discussion to be had with anything. I have a story to tell in a moment about aggression in medicine and the desire to always fix numbers. I've seen some other research, though, even linking low cholesterol potentially to cancers, infection. It all makes sense when you think you're going all in on this issue. Do you see hope, Dr. Peter, as a cardiologist? This is obviously your field. Do you sense that there are more cardiologists who are amazing like yourself and are starting to ask more questions about this, more than, say, 5 years ago?
Well, hopefully some are watching the video and they can open up that conversation.
Yeah.
I do, there is hope, and I do see more of a shift with patients, and definitely in my practice where the patient doctor visit is not going in there and being told what to do. It's becoming more of a collaborative visit. And then that's really the way to get the best healthcare for yourself, is make it a collaboration, open up discussions that maybe are not talked about. And so I do think that people and cardiologists will, and hopefully will continue to reevaluate what we've been doing for a long time. And it's always good in medicine to reevaluate and question everything.
And you feel the same about primary care as well?
I do. I do think the pandemic opened up a lot of people's eyes when there were some things that were happening that were so obviously egregious that people began to say, well, if this is broken and these are lies, what else is broken and what else is being lied about? So, and I have seen doctors begin to kind of start questioning, why are they pushing this so hard? Why this medication? Why do I have to use this? I'm not so sure it's working. So I'm hearing more discussions that are fruitful and optimistic. So yeah, I have optimism.
Yeah, and I get a lot of questions as well about this, especially the higher dose of statins in older people. I've noticed over the last couple of years, more people asking me questions, and I think that's good. Doctors should be there to answer questions, and no true person of science and medicine should mind being challenged. I personally like it when patients or their families bring to me research and challenge me. It's something that anybody who's a real doctor and wants to be in the shadows of Hippocrates should want to do, because ultimately it's about the best for you. We don't know everything. I want to get your opinion, gentlemen, on a story which highlights this, because the main premise of this show is that we have concerns that the medical establishment, or should I say medical industrial complex, is being super aggressive and has not thought things through. I've told this video before in some other content I've made. You may have heard it, but I will tell you it again. When I first started my residency training in Baltimore, I was bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, just arrived from the UK, and I got onto the hospital floors. And I remember there being posters up on the walls, and attendings who I was rounding with, some professors, were all in on being aggressive in lowering blood sugar in diabetics. So there was one study which was done, which showed a benefit of lowering the blood sugar under 100 in all people with type 2 diabetes. So nurses were going around administering insulin to type 2 diabetics to get their blood sugar under 100 or 110. It was in that range, but they wanted to get into double digits. And something didn't sit right with me. I'd come from the UK. I thought, this is really aggressive. Let me look into this. So I did my research and I discovered that this was based on one study, which was published, surprise, surprise, in the New England Journal of Medicine, that bastion of clean, non-pharma sponsored medicine. Go to their website if you want to see a pharma sponsored medical publication. That is it. But it's seen as the world's premier medical journal. They published a study done in cardiac ICU patients. And from that, the entire medical system in the USA decided to do this on every patient on the floor. And I thought, this is not right. I spoke to my attendings and they quite rightly said, look, Suneel, what you're saying makes sense. Why don't you run a study? So I did my own study. I did it all on my own. I got some attendings to also supervise me. And it took me a year and a half, 2 years to gather all the data, eventually looked at the results. And sure enough, patients who had had really strict blood sugar control did worse with cardiac conditions and were staying in hospital longer. The bottom line is I ended up presenting that as a poster in Maryland, and we were competing against Johns Hopkins, and my poster presentation actually won against Johns Hopkins. That was a big deal for our residency program. I published the paper in an endocrinology journal, a smaller one, and the whole basis of the presentation I gave was, have doctors jumped on the bandwagon too early? And it ended up being proved right. Within a year or two, they abandoned this. But for a good amount of time, they were being hyper aggressive everywhere in the US with blood sugars. And I have no doubt they caused immense damage and were causing hypoglycemia, low blood sugars in diabetics. And we know that can be catastrophic. But that was one example. I want to get you gentlemen's take on this because I've talked for a long time. How on earth did one study in one group of patients get propagated to everyone? And how did these professors of medicine at academic institutions all over the USA sanction this particular thing happening? Does that not highlight a classic blind spot? And why did it take me, a lowly intern, to question this and then publish a study? And I saw it all along that it was wrong to do this. How did that happen?
Well, that's a great point. There are just very few institutions that dictate how we practice, right? We have certain specific guidelines that we are supposed to follow, been told to follow. And so we've always been told not to question. And again, as a doctor, if you question something, you get ostracized about it. If you go out of the norm and try to go out of the box and that's really why your example really resonates, is that we are told by certain and very, prominent figures in medicine that this is how we should do it. And that's how it should be done. And we're expected to do that. But it's not always the right thing in this case.
That is often how it happens. It'll be that's how most things happen. It's a small group of people with a lot of power and a lot of pull, and they push something forward and it becomes the way and everyone starts doing it. The nice thing about the field of science in general, the scientific method, is everything is supposed to be questioned. It doesn't matter who presented it. It all must stand up to scrutiny. Now, the medicine and science are like everything else. There is the human element that disrupts it and corrupts it. And so you can have people in different positions and powerful influence, and they can kind of push things through. And you're right, in a culture where you're ostracized for going against people like that, it can be hard. And sometimes it takes a certain kind of person to stand up against it and figure out that something doesn't quite make sense, especially someone who's in training. That is a bold move. So
yeah, well, not to blow my own trumpet, but that is exactly what happened. And I've always learned. I mean, that was the way I was taught anyway, by some good old school professors. Question everything, and that's my nature. I haven't been afraid of seeing something which doesn't make sense happen during the pandemic, and I question it because I consider that my sacred duty as a doctor. But I think your particular explanation there of how there will be something dictated by one or two institutions which have, in my opinion, some lunatics who might be in charge and are not seeing the whole picture. And then from there, it will be propagated to everywhere. And doctors who are trained in this way, this is a whole reason we need massive medical education reform, will just repeat it. I mean, how is that being a good doctor? I know you gentlemen obviously think the same as me, and I've heard you over the years question a lot of things that even I haven't questioned. So we have this mindset here. But how do we get other doctors to see these basic things and to come full circle again? And we'll have closing statements. I believe that this is happening with low cholesterol. Neurologists and cardiologists everywhere are going around in the US, might be happening in the UK as well, saying, let's get this number down in like a 75, 80 or even younger. But they haven't thought it through. Why are you saying that the LDL cholesterol has to be below 70 or 80 in this person? Have you thought through what you're doing, and how strong is that evidence? Because I would hazard a strong guess, because I've seen this evidence, that it's not great evidence at all. The number needed to treat is huge, and you haven't considered the side effects. And I can guarantee you that many of the patients that you're doing this on, their particular demographics and age group wasn't even in the study in the first place.
That's so true. We know that. And I'll say that statins and medications can save lives in high-risk patients in post-events. And again, it's not about anti-medicine, but in the context that overprescribing to low-risk individuals can be very harmful. And you're right. The patient that comes out of the hospital on a high-dose statin who's 85, in the United States, 90 years old, we don't have a limit on what patients are put on medications. Now I'm talking about the United States where I practice, but it's not uncommon that I've seen patients, even well into their 90s, come out of the hospital on a higher dose statin, where it was not studied. We take into context medications that I do think that it probably makes physicians feel better to have people on a statin because they feel like they're checking the box. It's an algorithmic medicine we've talked about before. People hear guidelines. They don't question the guidelines. They open a pamphlet. They go on the computer, they hear a news update. This is how the guidelines are, like the new blood pressure guidelines are out. And all doctors just jump on that bandwagon and do that. But do they really think it through? And hopefully they'll start. And I think there is a shift to that because patients are questioning doctors now, where when I was first in practice, that wasn't much the case. But it's good. It's open conversations with patients. It's collaborative meetings, as I talked about.
Yeah. Let's have closing statements then on this particular topic. Dr. Ben, you want to go first?
Well, just say broadly, the doctor-patient relationship is considered sacred for a very important reason. It's because good doctors can be your last line of defense against everyone that's trying to hurt you and take, tests that you don't need or force you into treatments you shouldn't have. So you need to have a trusting relationship with physicians. And I think, or with your primary care doctor, hopefully. And I think that if we can make a change where physicians are once again beginning to question things and see their first duty as protecting you against all this stuff, that's going to change the course of medicine. Because right now it's going in a terrible direction. What you can do actively, educate yourself, find voices you trust. Hopefully we're one of them. And keep learning as much as you can about all this and listen to your body.
That was great, Ben. Living healthier is going to really be your best bet across everything. And all the topics we talk about, we have and while this talk hasn't really morphed into really a bigger topic of collaborating with your physician and questioning what we've all been told. And I think it opens up a lot of discussions and hopefully viewers will comment on their experiences. But I do think that you have to be your own advocate and you have to have personal responsibility, right? I mean, everything is a multifactorial approach in medicine. There's not one thing that cures all. There are certain things that are in your control, or certain things are not. And I really do believe that it was a personal responsibility is you have to really just be exercising regularly, eating healthy and well, but also just making sure that you're complying and being true to yourself as well, and not just making yourself or trying to get your cholesterol down because you know how you have a doctor's visit coming up, or you really want it to be sustainable.
Yeah, that's very well said. Well, I would say, again, I will echo your sentiments that healthcare is very personal. We know that when we say talk to your doctor, we know how tough it is to find good doctors out there. We wish we had some sort of master list of good doctors everywhere. It's tough to find. You have to go on local recommendations and trust your own gut instinct when you sit down with someone, and also how you feel about advice you're given and how you feel if you take any medication. Coming back to the main topic here that we're talking about, I believe that we will be proved right eventually, that being hyper aggressive in this area is not a good thing, and it's leading to all sorts of problems, especially in older people. And it's awful to see that happen. By the same token, I'm not saying that a medication to lower cholesterol is never indicated, or that having high cholesterol isn't a problem, especially if somebody's got the upstream insulin resistance and inflammation. It's all about the balance and individual discussions. This was a show about being hyper aggressive and how the medical establishment is likely wrong about that. So we hope that you've got something out of this discussion, lots to consider. We are rooting for you to succeed as naturally as possible. Your success is our success. Keep going. We know a lot of you are trying to do the right things every single day, as these good doctors have mentioned. Stay as healthy as you can. That's something you do control. What you put into your mouth, resisting those temptations, moving around, doing some strength training every day, and making health a number one priority. We will speak to you in the next episode. Do check in the links down below once more for our separate unique channel, Doctors of Ojai, and also our natural health and well-being store, ohiwellness.com if you're in the USA, North America, ohiwellness.co if you're in the UK, Europe. We will speak again very soon.